The summer heat in London was unbearable that Tuesday afternoon. Tourists crowded around Buckingham Palace, cameras clicking constantly as they tried to capture the perfect photo of the famous royal guards. Among them stood Marcus Chen, a 28-year-old teacher from California, who had saved for 2 years to afford this dream vacation to England. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the guard, standing perfectly still in his bright red uniform and tall black hat. The guard's name was James Mitchell, though Marcus didn't know this. James had been serving as a royal guard for 3 years, and he took immense pride in his duty to protect the royal family and maintain the traditions that tourists came from around the world to see. The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting the best angle for their photos. Marcus found himself just a few feet away from James, marveling at how the guard remained completely motionless despite the heat and chaos around him. Children were pointing and giggling, adults were posing for selfies, but James stood like a statue, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Marcus pulled out his phone to take a video to send to his students back home. He wanted to show them how disciplined and professional the royal guards were. As he held up his phone, a group of teenagers pushed past him, trying to get closer to the guard. One of them was carrying a large water bottle, and in the commotion, Marcus was shoved forward. He stumbled, trying to regain his balance, but his elbow knocked into the teenager's water bottle. The cap wasn't screwed on properly, and suddenly cold water splashed everywhere. Most of it hit the ground, but a significant amount splashed directly onto James's polished black boots and the bottom of his red uniform. The crowd immediately fell silent. Everyone knew that royal guards were not supposed to move or react, no matter what happened around them. There were stories of guards standing still even when tourists tried to make them laugh or when birds landed on their hats. But getting soaked with water was something different entirely. Marcus felt his heart sink into his stomach. His face turned bright red with embarrassment as he realized what had just happened. He had accidentally splashed water on one of the most disciplined soldiers in the world, someone who was supposed to remain unmoved no matter what. The other tourists stepped back, creating a small circle around Marcus and the guard, all of them waiting to see what would happen next. James felt the cold water seep through his uniform and into his boots. His first instinct was to maintain his position, as he had been trained to do. But something about this situation felt different. He could sense the genuine distress radiating from the young man who had clearly caused the accident without meaning to. Marcus stood frozen, not knowing whether to apologize, run away, or pretend it never happened. The silence stretched on, with dozens of people holding their breath, cameras still recording, waiting for the guard's reaction. Some tourists whispered among themselves, wondering if Marcus would get in trouble with the police or if the guard would break protocol. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus finally found his voice and whispered a barely audible, "I'm so sorry," but wasn't sure if he should speak louder or stay quiet. The water continued to drip from James's uniform onto the ground, creating small puddles around his feet. What happened next would change both men's lives forever, though neither of them knew it in that moment. The crowd waited, cameras ready as the seconds ticked by in what felt like the longest minute of Marcus's life. The royal guard remained perfectly still, but something was stirring behind his trained exterior that no one could have predicted. After what felt like an eternity, James Mitchell did something that shocked everyone present. Instead of maintaining his rigid stance, he slowly turned his head to look directly at Marcus. The crowd gasped collectively, phones and cameras capturing every second of this unprecedented moment. But what happened next left everyone speechless. A gentle smile spread across James's face, and he spoke in a calm, reassuring voice that carried clearly through the silent crowd. "Don't worry about it, mate. Accidents happen, and honestly, that water felt quite refreshing on such a hot day." The tourists couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A royal guard had not only broken his silence, but was actually being kind and understanding about the situation. Some people in the crowd began to whisper excitedly, while others continued filming, knowing they were capturing something truly extraordinary. Marcus blinked in surprise, his mouth hanging open slightly. He had expected anger, discipline, or at the very least stone-cold silence. Instead, he was looking at a warm, genuine smile from someone he had just accidentally drenched with water. I'm so incredibly sorry," Marcus stammered, his voice shaky with emotion. "I know you're not supposed to move or talk, and I've ruined everything. I feel terrible. James could see the genuine remorse in the young man's eyes and felt something stir in his chest. This wasn't just any tourist trying to get a reaction for social media fame. This was someone who was truly distressed about making an honest mistake. "Listen," James said, stepping slightly out of his formal position. "I can see you're a good person who didn't mean any harm. Sometimes being human is more important than following every rule to the letter." The crowd was now growing larger as word spread through the area that something unusual was happening with one of the guards. People were pulling out phones, calling friends, and pointing in amazement. Some tourists who had been planning to leave were now pushing forward to see what was going on. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness he was receiving. "You're being so nice about this. I was terrified I'd get you in trouble or that I'd ruined your day." James noticed the emotion in Marcus's voice and made a decision that would later prove to be life-changing for both of them. He stepped completely out of his formal stance and extended his hand toward Marcus. "My name is James," he said with that same warm smile. "And you are?" "Marcus," came the reply as Marcus shook the guard's hand with both relief and amazement. "I'm from California and this is my first time in London." The handshake between the tourist and the royal guard created a buzz of excitement among the onlookers. Cameras flashed and videos recorded as people realized they were witnessing something that would likely never happen again. James could feel his supervisor's eyes on him from across the courtyard, and he knew there would be questions later about his decision to break protocol. But in that moment, he didn't care about the potential consequences. He was responding to something deeper than military training. He was responding to basic human compassion. "Well, Marcus from California," James said, still holding the handshake. "Welcome to London. I hope this doesn't put you off visiting our beautiful city." The crowd began to applaud spontaneously, moved by the display of kindness and humanity they were witnessing. Some people wiped tears from their eyes, touched by the genuine connection forming between two strangers from completely different worlds. What nobody in that crowd knew was that both men were going through difficult times in their personal lives, and this chance encounter was about to become much more meaningful than anyone could have imagined. As the crowd continued to watch and record, something remarkable began to unfold. James noticed that despite Marcus's obvious relief at his kind response, there was still a deep sadness in the young man's eyes that went beyond embarrassment about the water incident. "You seem like you're carrying more than just worry about splashing a guard," James observed quietly, his voice gentle and concerned. "Are you all right?" Marcus was taken aback by the perceptive question. He hadn't expected this conversation to continue, let alone for a royal guard to show genuine interest in his well-being. The kindness in James's voice broke down the walls Marcus had been carefully maintaining throughout his trip. Well, it's been a difficult few months," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mom passed away from cancer 6 weeks ago. She always dreamed of visiting London together, but we never got the chance. I came here alone to fulfill her dream, but everything feels so empty without her." The crowd around them began to quiet down as people sensed the conversation had taken a more serious turn. James felt his heart clench with empathy. He understood loss in a way that Marcus couldn't know. "I'm so sorry for your loss," James said, his formal guard training forgotten as he focused entirely on the hurting person in front of him. "Losing a parent is one of the hardest things anyone can go through. The fact that you came here to honor her memory shows what a loving son you are." Marcus wiped his eyes, surprised by how comfortable he felt talking to this stranger. She would have loved seeing the guards. She collected postcards of Buckingham Palace and always said the guards represented everything dignified and noble about British tradition. "I was trying to take a video for her memorial page when I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin anything," James said firmly. "And I think your mother would be proud of the respectful, caring person you've become. Sometimes the most meaningful moments happen when we least expect them." James paused, looking around at the curious faces surrounding them. He made another decision that went against every protocol he'd ever learned. "Would you like to know something that might make you smile? Something your mother would have found interesting?" Marcus nodded, intrigued by what this extraordinary guard might share. "These uniforms we wear, they're not just for show. Each piece has meaning and history. The red represents courage and sacrifice, and the bearskin hats were originally worn by French soldiers that British forces defeated in battle. We wear them as a symbol of protection and honor." James reached up and touched his tall black hat. "But what most people don't know is that many of us think about the people we're protecting when we stand guard. Not just the royal family, but all the people who come here seeking something special. People like your mother who found meaning in our traditions. The crowd was now listening intently, many of them learning these details for the first time. Some people were crying as they watched this unexpected moment of human connection unfold. Your mother's dream wasn't just about seeing London, James continued. It was about sharing something beautiful with someone she loved. By coming here and thinking of her, you're making that dream real in a different way. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time since his mother's death, he felt a moment of peace and connection. Thank you for saying that. I've been feeling so lost and alone. You're not alone, James said with conviction. Loss changes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Your mother's love for you continues, and so does her dream of seeing you experience beautiful things. What neither man realized was that James was speaking from his own recent experience with loss. 3 months earlier, he had lost his younger brother in a military accident overseas. He had been struggling with grief and questioning his own purpose as a guard, wondering if standing still and looking dignified really mattered in a world full of pain. Meeting Marcus and seeing how much their brief interaction meant to someone who was grieving made James remember why he had chosen this path in the first place. He wasn't just guarding buildings or following traditions. He was part of something that brought comfort and meaning to people during their most vulnerable moments. As their conversation deepened, James found himself sharing something he hadn't talked about with anyone since returning to duty. The crowd around them had grown even larger, but both men seemed to have forgotten about the audience as they connected over their shared experiences with loss. I understand more than you might think, James said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that Marcus immediately recognized. I lost my younger brother David 3 months ago. He was serving overseas and there was an accident during a training exercise. Marcus felt his breath catch. Here was this strong, disciplined guard who had just revealed his own profound grief. I'm so sorry, James. That must be incredibly difficult, especially while you're trying to maintain your duties here. It has been, James admitted, his composed exterior showing cracks of vulnerability. David always said he wanted to be a royal guard like me someday. He was so proud of what I did, always bragging to his friends about his big brother who protected the Queen. After he died, I questioned whether any of this mattered anymore. The tourists around them had grown respectfully quiet, sensing they were witnessing something deeply personal and meaningful. Many people were wiping away tears as they listened to this unexpected conversation between two grieving souls. But talking to you today, James continued, seeing how much this moment means to you and thinking about your mother's dreams, it reminds me that David was right. What we do here isn't just about ceremony or tradition. It's about being part of something that brings people hope and connection. Marcus nodded, feeling a profound sense of understanding. My mom always said that the most important thing in life was to make connections with other people, to be kind when someone needs it most. She would say that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. She sounds like she was a wise woman, James said with genuine warmth. David had a similar philosophy. He used to say that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, so the least you can do is be kind. The parallel in their brother's and mother's wisdom wasn't lost on either of them. Marcus felt tears forming again, but this time they weren't tears of grief alone. They were mixed with gratitude for this unexpected moment of connection. Can I tell you something? Marcus asked, his voice growing stronger. When I planned this trip, I was dreading it. I thought it would just make me sadder, visiting all the places Mom wanted to see without her. But this conversation, this kindness you've shown me, it's the first time I've felt like she might actually be here with me somehow. James smiled, feeling something similar stirring in his own heart. I think our loved ones would be happy to know we found each other today. Sometimes I think David sends me reminders about why I chose this path. And maybe your mother guided you to splash that water so we could meet. Several people in the crowd were now openly crying, moved by the raw honesty and connection they were witnessing. Some had started recording not for entertainment, but because they recognized they were seeing something rare and beautiful. Two strangers healing each other through simple human kindness. You know what's strange? Marcus said, managing a real smile for the first time in weeks. Mom always said that the best travel stories aren't about the places you see, but about the people you meet along the way. I thought that was just something parents say, but now I understand what she meant. Your mother was absolutely right, James agreed. The best part of my job isn't the ceremony or the honor. It's the moments like this when you realize that a simple act of kindness can change someone's entire day, maybe even their life. As James spoke, his supervisor approached from across the courtyard. Both men could see that their conversation would need to end soon, but neither wanted this meaningful connection to be lost. They had found something neither expected, a reminder that healing often comes from the most unexpected places and that sharing our pain with others can somehow make it more bearable. The crowd sensed the approaching end of this extraordinary encounter, and many people began to express their gratitude for being allowed to witness such a beautiful moment of human connection in an increasingly disconnected world. As James's supervisor approached, both men realized their time together was coming to an end. But what had started as an embarrassing accident had transformed into something neither of them would ever forget. "Before you go," Marcus said quickly, "I want you to know that you've given me something I didn't even know I needed. You've shown me that my mom's spirit of kindness is still alive in the world, and that gives me hope." James nodded, understanding exactly what Marcus meant. "And you've reminded me why David was so proud of what I do. You've helped me remember that serving others, even in small ways, can make a real difference." The supervisor reached them just as they were finishing their conversation. Instead of the stern reprimand both men expected, the older officer smiled warmly. "I've been watching from across the way," he said. "What you've done here today represents the very best of what we stand for as Royal Guards. You've shown compassion and humanity while maintaining the dignity of your position." The crowd began to applaud again, this time even more enthusiastically than before. People were calling out words of encouragement and gratitude. Several tourists approached Marcus and James, wanting to share their own stories of loss and how witnessing this interaction had touched their hearts. An elderly woman from Germany stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "My husband died last year," she said to both men. "Watching you two connect over your grief and find comfort in each other gives me hope that I'm not as alone as I sometimes feel." A young father holding his daughter's hand spoke up next. "I want my children to remember this moment," he said. "They've just learned that kindness and understanding are more important than following rules blindly." As word of the interaction spread through social media, the videos and photos taken by tourists began going viral around the world. But this wasn't just another internet sensation. People were sharing the story because it reminded them of the power of human connection during difficult times. News outlets picked up the story, but instead of focusing on the spectacle of a guard breaking protocol, they highlighted the meaningful conversation about grief, healing, and kindness. Mental health advocates praised both men for showing that it's okay to be vulnerable and that sharing our struggles can help us heal. Marcus spent the rest of his day in London with a completely different perspective. Instead of feeling alone and sad, he found himself noticing acts of kindness everywhere he looked. He helped a lost tourist find directions, bought coffee for a homeless veteran, and spent time talking with elderly visitors at a museum who reminded him of his mother. For James, returning to his duties felt different too. Instead of simply standing guard, he found himself thinking about the people around him with renewed purpose. He made small gestures of acknowledgement to children who waved at him, offered subtle smiles to families taking photos, and felt genuinely connected to his role as a protector and symbol of British values. The other Royal Guards had heard about the incident, and instead of criticism, James received support and admiration from his colleagues. Many of them shared their own stories of times when they wished they could have reached out to someone who seemed to need compassion. By evening, the hashtag Kindness Matters was trending globally, with people sharing their own stories of unexpected acts of kindness from strangers. The simple interaction between a tourist and a guard had sparked a worldwide conversation about the importance of human connection and empathy. Marcus called his best friend back in California that night, and for the first time since his mother's death, he sounded genuinely hopeful. "I know this sounds crazy," he said, "but I think Mom somehow arranged for me to meet James today. She always believed that the right people come into your life exactly when you need them most." James went home to his small apartment and, for the first time in months, looked at pictures of his brother David without feeling overwhelming sadness. Instead, he felt grateful for the reminder that David's values of kindness and service lived on through his own actions. Neither man knew it yet, but their brief encounter was about to create ripples that would extend far beyond that single afternoon at Buckingham Palace. 6 months after that fateful day at Buckingham Palace, both Marcus and James had experienced profound changes in their lives that traced back to their unexpected encounter. Marcus had returned to California with a completely different outlook on life and grief. Instead of isolating himself as he had been doing since his mother's death, he started a support group at his school for students dealing with loss. He shared the story of meeting James as an example of how healing can come from the most unexpected places. The support group grew rapidly as word spread about the teacher who understood what it meant to lose someone important. Marcus found that helping others process their grief gave new meaning to his own loss. He often told his students about his mother's belief in kindness and how a stranger's compassion had reminded him that love and connection could survive even death. James had been commended by his superiors for showing that royal guards could maintain their dignity while also demonstrating humanity. The incident led to new guidelines that gave guards more flexibility to respond with compassion in appropriate situations, while still maintaining their primary duties. More importantly for James, he had started volunteering with military families who had lost loved ones in service. He used his experience with David's death and his conversation with Marcus to help others navigate their grief. Many families found comfort in talking to someone who understood both military life and personal loss. The viral video of their interaction had been viewed millions of times. But what made it special wasn't just the novelty of a guard-breaking protocol. People around the world had started sharing their own stories of how strangers had shown them kindness during difficult times, creating a global conversation about compassion and human connection. A documentary filmmaker reached out to both men, wanting to create a film about their story and its impact. They agreed, hoping that sharing their experience might encourage others to reach out with kindness when they see someone struggling. During the filming, Marcus and James met again for the first time since that day at Buckingham Palace. The reunion was emotional for both men, as they reflected on how much their brief encounter had changed their lives. "I never expected that splashing water on you would lead to this," Marcus said with a laugh as they stood in the same spot where they had first met. "Mom always said that life works in mysterious ways, but this seems almost too incredible to believe." "I think about that day often," James replied. "It taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present for another person's pain. Your willingness to share your story with me reminded me that we're all more alike than different." The documentary, titled "When Strangers Become Hope," was released a year after their meeting. It featured not just Marcus and James, but dozens of other people who had been inspired by their story to reach out with kindness to strangers in need. The film sparked a movement called Splash of Kindness, where people committed to performing one unexpected act of compassion each week. Schools, businesses, and community organizations around the world adopted the program, leading to countless stories of small gestures that made big differences in people's lives. Marcus kept a photo on his classroom wall of himself, shaking hands with James, surrounded by the crowd of amazed tourists. He used it to teach his students about the power of authentic human connection and how sharing our vulnerabilities can create strength rather than weakness. James framed a letter he received from Marcus's students, thanking him for showing their teacher that kindness from strangers could help heal a broken heart. He kept it in his locker and read it whenever he needed a reminder of why his work mattered. Both men stayed in touch, exchanging emails about their work with grief support and their ongoing efforts to spread kindness in their communities. They had become unlikely friends, connected by a moment of accidental vulnerability that revealed the deep human need for compassion and understanding. Years later, when people asked Marcus about the most important moment of his trip to London, he would smile and say that it wasn't seeing Big Ben or Westminster Abbey. It was the moment when a royal guard chose to be human first and a soldier second, showing him that his mother's legacy of kindness was alive and well in the world. For James, the memory of that hot afternoon served as a constant reminder that true strength comes not from standing perfectly still, but from knowing when to move towards someone who needs help. The splash of water that could have been seen as a disaster became the catalyst for two men to discover that healing often comes disguised as ordinary moments of extraordinary compassion.